Okay. All right, well, hello.
Hello.
Anyway, my name's Alice. I'm the nurse practitioner here, and we do this show once a month. It's called Get Some, and it's a show about health with a human sexuality emphasis. So, I'll tell you in a moment what tonight's topic is, and we're gonna, hopefully you'll actively participate, because it's more fun when you can provide some input and your reflection or perspective, okay? But who we have with us tonight, and she was with me last month, is Dr. Keisha Morant-Williams, and she just comes with a wealth of information. She's a professor in the CAS department, and she has done research on relationships and health communication, so it fits perfect with our topic tonight. So let me just go back a little bit. December 1st was World AIDS Day. And one of the events that we did on World AIDS Day, and I don't know if many of you participated, was in the lobby, we had a big screen TV, and we had a polling question. And the question was, what do you feel is the most important local issue regarding HIV? And there were 4 different responses, and you just had to take your cell phone and punch in the response that you felt was the most important. And the one that got the most hits was communicating with your partner in taking a sexual health history. So that's what tonight's program is on, how to communicate with your partner in taking a sexual health history. And it was all based on that question. That was the most popular answer of the polling question. So I think that's neat. And you're also going to see that not only in your sexual relationship, but in all your relationships throughout life, communication is probably the most powerful tool that you'll have. And how important it is, and how we can learn little tips in having good communication with everyone around us. But we'll try to focus more on sexual health history. We'll go along with what that polling question was. Make sense? We good? Okay. So let's just start with why do you think it's difficult to ask sexual health questions with a partner, maybe that you're already in a relationship, or a potential partner, someone who you're thinking about having a relationship with? Why might that be difficult? Go ahead.
It's embarrassing sometimes. People think that sometimes people don't want to know what you found in your past.
Oh, they're both good points. So embarrassing, or sometimes people don't want to know. You mean you wouldn't want to know, or they don't want to tell you, or both? Possibly both, yeah.
I mean, I think those are definitely key reasons and solid examples as why people don't necessarily want to talk, because you don't want someone to necessarily think, oh, you've been around and you've been with a lot of people, or you don't necessarily feel comfortable asking those questions. So I mean, I think that most certainly makes perfect sense.
What else?
How about other folks?
Why is it so darn difficult to talk to someone about that?
Or would you be offended if someone asked you, if your partner asked you about your sexual health history? Would you answer? Would you be offended? Would you be put off?
No, I wouldn't be offended, but then I would answer because I ask my parents to feel like it's so they have a right to know, just like I have a right to know. So I don't think I would be offended. I would just answer. I think it would be easier to just answer the question than to ask them about what their sexual history was.
And that brings up a good point. The right to know if you're going to be intimate with someone, and being an askable person. Some people aren't askable people, so that's something you want to think about. Hey, do I want to be the type of person that is approachable, that we can discuss this? So very good point. And you were going to say something.
I was going to say, I think even as a guy, some of those things you're told not to talk about, like what happened in the past.
That's a good point.
Okay. So then is there a difference between asking someone about their sexual health history in relationship to testing or relationship to using protection versus asking someone, how many partners have you had and were they any of my friends? Is there a difference in when we're talking about sexual health history versus full self-disclosure of everything you've ever done? Because I think that's an excellent point, that you don't necessarily want to tell everyone every element of your past. So talk with us, share with us.
You each have a handout, right? And the handout up at the top lists some statements. And then there's discussion points. Yeah, there, yeah. So let's talk about that first one. Let's talk about the first statement. Do you think that might be a common statement? It says condoms lessen the feeling. Do you think that might be a common statement that someone might say to a partner? So that maybe they don't want to use condoms? And then what you can go on to do is negotiate that. Okay? And how can you go about negotiating that? If someone said to you, hey, condoms lessen the feeling, I don't want to use condoms. Okay, right. And that's always an option too. If people aren't going to negotiate and meet you halfway, then that might be a point where you want to cut things off. Yeah, so that's a very good point that you make up there, or that you mentioned. Yeah. So that might be a reason to back away.
I think that's an interesting point, though, that you throw out, in saying that if a person says no, they don't want to use a condom, then I guess I'm not going to have sex with you. We're not going to be intimate. Because in one of the studies where I talked to high school age girls that had had children, and I said, why did you not use protection? Why didn't you say use a condom? Or why weren't you on birth control? And in many cases, they just said, well, you know, I didn't really want to ask, I was speaking to the young ladies, I just didn't really want to ask him, or I felt like it was too late, or I didn't want to sound like I did this a lot, you know. And so they found themselves in situations of where they did want to use condoms, but they didn't have the confidence to just a matter of factly say, well, then we're not going to have sex if we don't do this. Oddly enough, or interestingly enough, when I asked the question in reverse to guys, then the guys were a little bit older that I spoke to, and why they didn't use condoms in these certain situations, they said, because my partner didn't ask me to. And so, it again goes back to
Communication was
communication.
missing, yeah. And also, part of communication is setting your limits. And like you said, okay, if you're not going to use a condom, then we're not going to have sex. And that's your limit. And that's good to communicate your limit. Or we can do this if we do this. And you want to listen to each other. So that was a really good point. How else can we negotiate? What do you think? Go ahead.
I'm having trouble understanding how you can negotiate condoms. It's either you're going to use it or you don't. I mean, I don't never really saw it in the middle between.
And so and that's why it's important to respect each other and trust each other and be concerned and caring for each other, because in some relationships it doesn't work both ways, and that's why it's important for you to speak and also you to be heard. Yeah, so I hear what you're saying, that, well, geez, if there's no negotiation, then why are we even having this discussion? And some people don't realize the importance of communication. Yeah, so good point. Let's look at the next one. Someone says unclean. What do you think that means? Okay, so they don't have any sexually transmitted infections. And if someone says that, how do you respond to that? How does that start communication? Or how can it lead into good communication? Go ahead, Dara.
I usually use it as a way to see if they have been tested. So they say, I'm clean, or the last time you been tested.
Okay, that's a good point, right. Well, my list, and you're asking broad questions, which is good, which allows dialogue.
But if they say I'm clean, they kind of open it up for dialogue. I feel like, so you try to check it out. Okay, well, I'm clean, but it's already done to that.
Yeah.
I like to talk about it.
Yeah. And when we say tested, what do we mean by tested? Anybody know? But I think the important part then to know with your partner is, how were you tested? And some people will say, well, I went to my doctor and they said I'm healthy. Sometimes that doesn't mean you were tested for sexually transmitted infections. So there's different ways that we test, and I'm going to go a little bit off track because the first week of February, yeah, so all of next week, yes, I am pregnant, oh my goodness. is National Condom Week. So in health services, we're doing a Cover Your Lover campaign, and you all get a present when you leave here that has to do with the Cover Your Lover campaign. And we will be doing chlamydia and gonorrhea screenings. So chlamydia, the most common bacterial sexually transmitted infection, all right? And sometimes gonorrhea just likes to travel with it. I don't know why, it just does. And we check for the two at the same time with a urine test, okay? So it's a $12 urine test, no charge for the visit. We only charge you the $12 for the urine test because that's what we have to pay for it. And then if you would have either, the treatment's free because we get the treatment free from the state health department. But, so if someone says, hey, I'm clean, and you went into asking more specific questions, what does that mean? When were you last tested? What were you tested for? They should say a urine test, and that test for chlamydia and gonorrhea, and then there's a blood test. And with the blood test, we can check for syphilis, HIV, hepatitis. So important things to know to discuss, well, what were you checked for? And how were you checked? And if they just said, well, you know, they listened to my heart and lungs and said I was good, that doesn't necessarily mean you're clean, okay? So it does, it opens up dialogue.
But even if we sit there for a minute, is that a realistic conversation? Is that a conversation that you have with your partners or that you have with someone that you're considering being intimate with? Do you even ask each other about testing? Do you ask each other about, diseases or having been checked or anything along those lines? Like, is that a normal conversation? Because from my understanding, for most young people that I have worked with or talked to, it isn't a normal conversation at all. And so how do we even get there? Like, I think it's excellent that we have the language that we can use if we get there, but how do we even get to that place where, okay, I'm comfortable enough to take off my clothes with you and, do, but I'm not comfortable enough to ask you about these health-related things. So how do we move past that? What do you guys think? What might be some feedback? In a perfect world, how might we address that?
Without accusing someone. Go ahead.
Well, I guess it depends on your partner. Like, if you know that you want to have sex sooner than later, like, I think you should take steps to just gently touch on certain stuff. Personally, me, I'm probably just gonna come out and ask if you've been tested because I know eventually that I might want to have sex with you, and if you have something, I would like to know, So I think if you're comfortable with the person and you just lead up to it, some people just want to get it right over and then, but I think if you, with that person, you're comfortable and y'all talk about stuff like that, and it leads up to it, I guess it depends on the partner.
I would say maybe open communication. So I say open communication. People don't know anything. You're considering having sex with this person. Like you know that about the so you know you can know more about it and stuff like something as simple as when you get tested, it shouldn't be an issue because we probably talk about my mind about it and bet my grandma about it. So we should be able to talk about things like that when we have sex.
Okay.
And then also, rather than being on the defensive and, well, what if you have something, or I think you might have something since you haven't been tested, rather than accusing someone, it might be better to do the I statements. I feel that it's important that we check this out, or I would feel more comfortable, or how do you feel about? So you're asking, so there are I statements, you're not accusing someone of something, and then they're also open-ended, that you'll get more, you won't just get a yes or no, are you clean? And they say yes. And then the conversation stops and it's confusing and you really didn't find anything out. So open-ended questions and I statements, because you have a right to feel how you feel and you're not accusing anybody of anything. Everybody has a right to their feelings, and then you want to hear your potential partner's feelings too. Once again, be askable, be a good listener.